I'm Greg Moore with news on the Blaze Radio Network.
The fusion of rational thought and political analysis. This is what your brain has been waiting for. News, politics, and issues. Enhance. You have just joined the Will Count Majority.
The next generation of great talk radio, the undisputed leader of the new school. And Will Count Sirius XM Patriot phone lines as always 1-866-95-PATRIOT. The email is coming in right, WILKOW at WillCountMajority.com. Individual Patriot first, conservative second, Republican third, and working every single day to make this the most popular program offered by Sirius XM Satellite Radio, because based on one thing and one thing only, and that is rational thought. So welcome to the Will Count Majority. I'm Andrew Will Count. Here's another one for you. And I know I'm going to sound so evil when I point this one out. Headline from Roll Call: Backers hope paid sick leave laws are contagious. Oh, isn't that cute? When one defeats, and this is how I know. Let me just minimize this for a second here. I didn't print this one out, so I'm using it off the computer. I always know when I'm reading the work of a progressive writer, when I don't get a single fact up front, I get an anecdotal story. And this is how you know you're not dealing with real journalism anymore. When the first thing that you get is an anecdotal story that is supposed to convey some form of sympathy or emotion, some form of sympathy in the reader, then you are not dealing with your rational. The writer's not appealing to your rational side anymore. They're trying to draw you in emotionally before presenting you with facts. So you approach the facts of the case with an emotion rather than any rational. So I'll give it to you. When Wanda Cobb's 2 children fell ill for an extended period this winter due to complications from their type 1 diabetes, the decision to stay home to care for them came more easily than it held in the past. Thanks to a Connecticut law that took effect last year, Cobbs, a school bus driver for the West Hartford public school system, had access to paid sick leave for the first time. It was hard because you didn't have anything to fall back on, Cobbs said about previous decisions to stay home with her sick children. You had to lose that time from work and not be paid for it. Okay, so what am I learning from this? That you are going to get paid for work you're not doing? Connecticut, which allows service workers who receive an hourly wage to earn 1 hour of paid sick time for every 40 hours worked, is the first in the state in the nation to mandate paid sick leave. Okay, so it says now if Tom Harkin of Iowa, Representative Rosa DeLauro of Connecticut get their way, that will change for millions of workers across the country. Now, how is that supposed to be viewed by employers?
Really?
Now, I understand it's like renters versus landlords here in New York City with rent control. Renters become the chosen class or the protected class. They're also the many class. There are more renters than there are landlords. There are more employees than there are employers. And if the government is your employer, whether state, local, or federal, well, it doesn't matter if the collective is the employer, you're still paying as a taxpayer. So paid sick leave, all right, how much? How much should somebody not be at work and still get paid for work they're not doing? Now, the progressive will say, well, what do you want her to do about her sick children? Hold on a second. If you're working at a job, this is your task. This is the task to be performed for your employer, whether that employer is public or private. If you're not doing it and you're still getting paid, somebody else has to do that job and they have to get paid too. From a business perspective, if you've allocated, let's just say, a round number of $10 an hour per worker, if that worker is not there working, but still collecting the $10 an hour, and you have to pay somebody else to do that job, and you have to pay them $10 an hour. So now you're no longer paying $10 an hour for a unit of work. In some cases, you're paying $20 an hour for the same $10 hour of unit of work. That's just a loss to you. So the question becomes, how much should a worker be allowed to not work and still collect the results of work? A full 40% of private sector American workers have no access to paid sick days, meaning they cannot miss a day without risking a day's pay or even their job, said Harkin. Okay, I'm sorry. I can't speak for every sector of the economy and every employer. A day? I have never met anybody that would fire an employee for taking a day off to tend to their sick children. I have never met anybody like that.
I just want a large unsweetened iced tea, please.
And all of a sudden says, well, there's no limit to what you can take before you can fire somebody. Where you really can't fire somebody at that point. So, all right, so how much do you get? Where's the line drawn? How much do you have to be compensated at the expense of your employer before your employer could say, I can no longer maintain my business with you as an employee? If you've got 10 employees and one of them is taking time off to spend with sick children, what if it's 6? You've got to now pay 6 workers who are not working and 6 replacement workers. How do you run a business that way? And if you're the business owner, if you don't turn that key, who's going to work for you? I'll give you an anecdote if you need one. My father ran a small business basically by himself. If my father didn't go to work every day, his store didn't get open. If his store didn't get open, he didn't sell merchandise. If he didn't sell merchandise and reorder merchandise, he didn't take a profit and be able to pay his mortgage and pay for his family. So if this is going to be bestowed upon employees, is the government going to come in and run your business for you if you're a small? Oh, no, see, that's different. That's de-incentivizing starting a business. It's better than to work for a business than to start a business. If you're running a business, the government does nothing for you there. There's no legislation that says,
thank you.
Well, if you're running a restaurant and you don't come in to work, that the government is going to make people eat in your restaurant. If you're running a dry cleaners, that the government's going to make people bring you their dirty clothing. If you're running a mechanic shop and you don't come into work, that the government's going to make people with broken down cars come to you. Or if you're running a small Army and Navy store, in the case of my father, that you're going to bring people in and demand that they purchase Army and Navy surplus. So if you're a small business owner, screw you. 1-866-95-PATRIOT, 957-2874. There are lots of businesses out there, and again, this is why central planning is such a failing idea. A small business can be a one-person operation. You know, not every maid in America, and I say maid, I mean M-A-I-D, works for a maid service. There are lots of people out there running cleaning businesses that are 1 and 2 people operations. There are lots of small businesses like plumbers and small home contractors that are 1 to 2 people. If one of those people doesn't show up to work, then the job doesn't get done. But the government doesn't step in. And what is the government going to do at that point? If you're a plumber and you take on a plumbing contract in somebody's private home and you say, I'm sick, I can't come to work, and that homeowner says, well, then I'm going to find another plumber, is the government going to step in and say, no, Mr. Homeowner, this person has accrued one hour of sick leave for every 40 hours worked. You can't go find another plumber. You're just going to have to wait with leaky pipes until this plumber is better. Oh, you see, when you start to put it like that, all of a sudden the emotional stuff starts to go out the window. 1-866-95-PATRIOT. And it doesn't stop at sick children. You'll find that it's secondary family member. Well, my second uncle's sick, I've got to stay home. In other words, once you give somebody the excuse to put on paper, and the bureaucrats are the ones determining if the excuse is valid, when you've got clock-watching bureaucrats not even reading this stuff anymore, you'll find that people tend to find family members who are sick. My second cousin's brother-in-law is sick. I need 6 months off of work. 1-866-95 Patriot. So we're going to have tax increases, more social spending, and more reasons why people can't go to work. But Andrew, remember, this woman's kid's got diabetes. You're just an evil, heartless person. You're just an evil, heartless person. Well, how do you transfer fairness? If it's unfair to make this woman go to work because she has decided to stay home with her children, what about the lack of fairness for her employer, in this case the public sector, or the person that has to do her job in the short term but can't do it in the long term because part of this is guaranteeing that job when the other person returns to work? So if you take a job, let's say, I don't know, working in an office for somebody who is out sick or is tending the family members, and you're doing the job, you've been doing it 1 week now, 2 weeks now, 3 weeks now, 4 weeks now they want to come back, you've got to start all over again. Or is it we just pick and choose who's entitled? See, progressive fairness means picking and choosing who deserves fairness. 1-866-95 Patriot. Let's see, John, upstate New York. You're in the Wilcow Majority. Hello.
Hey, Andrew, I'll tell you what, man. You and my church are like two people I would just love to sit down and have a cigar with.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, top of my list. So maybe someday, but in this prevailing wage thing, that really caught my attention. I have a little experience with it. The company I was with prior, we had we were cleaning out tanks in New York City. It was a city job contract, and we were paying guys to power wash and pump out tanks $45 to $50 an hour. When the minimum wage went up, the prevailing wage went up. When you had a guy as with one job title doing a specific job, and if you wanted him to, let's say, to go turn on a pump, no, you can't do that. You have to have another guy at another wage class turn that pump on. So my question is if this was a deal to pay these illegal aliens prevailing wages now for jobs they're doing now for whatever they're earning, first of all, how do you enforce something like that? How does, what about right to work states? What right does the government have now to say that you're going to have to pay this guy or this worker this much money to do whatever job he's doing, whether that be a laborer on a farm, a maid in a hotel, a guy at a meat packing plant? Where's this going?
Well, essentially, it's going to start with we don't want to force parents to choose between working and sick children. And there are economic theorists who say, well, if we all worked per diem, we would decide how much we need to work and how much time for other things we would want. But nobody, we don't want to, again, that's a very emotional decision. How much do you want to work versus how much time do you want to spend with sick children? But it doesn't stop there, because once you've run out the spending, then it becomes other family members. Then it becomes entire communities. There was a problem in Wisconsin, and we've gone over this, that when Tommy Thompson took over as governor, people were putting in for their work fare, caring for friends. Caring for friends? What do you mean caring for friends? Well, that's anybody that I know that I want to care for. Now give me my state money. I mean, that's idiotic. That's like saying, well, if I clean my neighbor's house, the government should pay me. I shouldn't have to go out and get a real job. I'll just clean. I'm taking care of my neighbor.
If they're going to force businesses, regardless of the size of the business, to pay a prevailing wage, that is going to kill the small businessman, because the large business can absorb that cost for an extended period of time versus a small business.
Well, yes, and that's why every time you hear Democrats talk about small businesses, it's nonsense. If it were up to progressives, elite progressives would prefer 2 to 3 large businesses covering every sector of the economy. This way, there would be no choice in the marketplace when they just passed off the cost of regulation, and there would also be very little resistance because, you and the 2 other players would just, again, pass it off to the marketplace, and there'd be very little competition.
Precisely.
Thank you.
Why business gets behind it, things.
Certain businesses do. Businesses get behind legislation when it benefits them. All right, I'll get the rest of the calls next. We're right, they're wrong. That's the end of the story. The arguments on this radio program cannot be broken. Sirius XM Patriot.